Sweet dreams, real dreams, we hate when it's ending. Feels good outside of reality, this time we spending. But their alarms blaring, it's time to wake us up. Sunshine, he poured me in your cup, so I'm hot and uncomfortable. We ain't lukewarm here, you gotta sip it slow. It's gonna burn a little and you might have to blow, but get it, take it in and it's digestible. What? We talking ruddy brew, good to wake you up, expelling rubbish too. Almighty stir of fuck gave us a count of you. Not to destroy the kingdom, but trying heretics, exposing real treason. Jake, wake up, come taste to see a double entendre. It's strong, it's black and pure, sip the ruddy brew world. Wake up and here I'm trying to tell you something, no need to fear the truth. I am the ruddy brew. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Years trapped making mental notes. They stole the youth so they wouldn't be exposed to lineage and trying to return, but it's spiritual now. We're trying to learn, confused. At first reading Braille they didn't get to choose. In the wilderness we weren't meant to lose, but we said yes to the curse. Forever against the elders, settled for the worst. Still blind in real time, we're in foreign lands. Big 615, we built their houses with our hands. Sip, lean, blow smoke, listen to them choke. Pride in the crime, the same laws our forefathers broke. We blunder, thinking we should try again, when Messiah's work already's restored our win. Under willow trees, we should be humming, not slumming. Get on our knees, praising and awaiting Emmanuel, the King, and his second coming. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Jake, wake up, pick 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 up. Da 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 da. Wake up, pick 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 up. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Under willow trees we should be humming, not slumming. Get on our knees, praising and awaiting Emmanuel, the King, in his second coming.
Welcome to the Ready Brew, where the conversation is always welcome. We use a little bit of biblical information, a little bit of historical information, a little bit of DNA, and we try to get us back to center. But at any rate, let me first thank you all for showing up, whether you're here or if you're watching on replay. I appreciate it. It's pretty late, so I got a lot to talk about. But before we get started, I do want to go over a few things, try to keep the conversation a little light. As far as current events are concerned, President Trump is said to be trying to get out of this war without a nuclear deal. I don't know, too much of what the backstory is with that. other than they're saying he pretty much sees how terrible things are and how bad it looks with our economy right now. So hopefully we'll get that resolved soon. Uh, let's see. It is said that our new what is he? Attorney General. I think that's what Todd Blanche is. It said that he's officially terminated that 1776 fund. The fund that they were trying to put together to pretty much pay the January 6th rioters for their hardships, the things that they've experienced being victims of discrimination by our government. But Todd Blanchard said that that fund has now been done away with. So I did hear that there might be some loopholes in the statement or whatever it is that he wrote up. But we're going to see how that plays out as well. This is just a little bit of current event stuff. See if we can get a couple more people on the live. But let's see. It said that Iran has been reported to have issued an assassination threat on President Trump today. And it said that it resulted in him being secretly moved from Air Force One and to a smaller private jet by some type of non-government vehicle. And a lot of retort is being made because there was a large concern from the beginning about how well this new Qatari plane was going to benefit the president because they're not able to outfit it properly for security and whatnot. And I don't know everything that goes into Air Force One, but I know that there's a lot of security, little security things that have to be implemented in order to, make sure that the president is properly protected. But sometimes I'm not going to say greed, but let's see, what would I call it? Machismo, ego, that type of thing. It'll make you put yourself in a position that's not so healthy, and I think that some of our richest people are finding that out the hard way. Money doesn't solve all problems. If you are in any way a regular person or a common citizen, then you understand that money doesn't solve problems at all. In fact, when you love money, you tend to get yourself in more trouble because you do things that go either above the line or things that kind of push you off the side of the road. So yeah, but as far as that Qatari plane is concerned, that thing is not suited or suitable for security. So yeah, he's and this is the second time that he's discarded that plane or discarded that plane because of security threats from Iran. And I mean, at some point you would get it. But one thing that I don't understand for the life of me is why, as the president of the United States, this man has taken everything as ego trip because he's bragged about how he's what am I trying to say? He's annihilated, how he's taken out certain number of heads of state and government from the Irani people. So I don't and then almost daily threaten to bomb them off the map. At some point, people get tired of being the recipient of threats, and whether they mean it or not, I don't know. The common talking point right now is that they've they've been they've been spouting hatred and trying to kill Americans for 47 years. I mean, I'm not real close to government issues. I haven't been following Iran for that many years. I've heard things as to why they feel the way they do about America. And again, it goes back to that money situation because the love of money makes you do all kinds of sinister things. And it was about almost 50 years ago when America tried to pretty much take over their oil industry, taking food out of their people's mouths, that type of thing. So I can understand, where there could be some hate. I don't condone it at all, but I can understand. That's what any man. I don't care whether you're American, whether you're Asian, whether you are European, African, whatever the situation may be. If anybody threatens your livelihood, there comes a point where being back in the corner, you're either gonna come out swinging, or you're gonna roll over and die, or roll over and just take the abuse. And in this case, I don't think that they are going to roll over and take the abuse. I mean, we are talking about ancient Persia, for God's sake. I mean, you can look back through history. You can look through Bible history. I mean, these people have always been warring people. So I don't understand why we would have jumped in that in that anthill to begin with, because Jesus Lord. But yeah, so this story I think is developing. I don't think it's very mainstream. I don't know. It's just something that I saw real quick when I was browsing earlier. Something that Don Lemon had mentioned. So yeah, Iran has reportedly issued another assassination threat to President Trump, which resulted in him being secretly moved or removed from Air Force One and moved via a non-government vehicle to safety. So with that, we're going to transition from our current events, and I want to talk about some positive black news. Now, just looking over some things, I found this site here. Let's see if I can interact. Uh-oh, give me a minute. All right. So this site is the National Black Cultural Information Trust. National Black Cultural Information Trust, or NBCI Trust. And I think it's a really good site for information pertaining to Black America specifically. Um, the, the site is very interactive. Just to read a little bit. It says about us. This is our work. Since 2020, the National Black Cultural Information Trust Incorporated has reached 50,000 individuals, distributed thousands of educational resources, hosted cultural programs serving families across multiple states, and helped communities access trusted information, black history education, and cultural preservation initiatives. Through media events and partnerships, we continue to expand opportunities for learning, engagement, and community empowerment. At a moment when black history is being challenged, distorted, and removed from public spaces, NBCI Trust stands committed to preserving our stories, sharing trusted information, and empowering communities through education and culture. So yeah, this is the site here, um, and you can go check it out. Again, this is NBCI Trust. Let me see. It is NBCI NBCIT.org is the website, nbcit.org. And as you can see, it's a and it has a donation link. So go over there and support, um, lift these people up, help them get our information out there so that we can help each other. You know, one thing I believe about the black community that we don't talk about enough is that we need to come together. We need to become a unit again. I mean, it's been 60 years since the civil rights movement, a time when you can pretty much say that that the black community was united in some respect. There are a lot of things about the stories or the situations that happened with the stories from behind the scenes, but all in all, we were together, moving toward the same causes, trying to benefit the community, and I think that's where we need to go again. Um, that's a part of the reason I do what I do, because I believe that it's when you know who you are and where you come from that you begin to pretty much move the way you need to move so that you can uplift your community, so that you can especially begin teaching the children. One thing that I'm finding out is that when it comes to how we advance, it starts with our children. And you can see throughout history, even back in the Bible, when it came to the Hebrews, it always started with taking out the children, because especially the boy children, because if you take out the boy children, you end up not having a generation of men to lead any type of effort to protect the community. So I really truly believe it comes back down to us becoming a unit, becoming a community again. So yeah, go and check out this site, nbcitrust.org. Donate, help them out. They even have a Facebook page, but the links are on their website, so you can get there. And again, they do have donation. They have a donation link on their Facebook page. So yeah, go over there and support. But let's see. They have on their site some information that I think is good information as far as the black community is concerned. And these are some of the press releases. CBC members and black mayors discuss safety in the age of Trump. Says, and I'm gonna read a little bit here. Yesterday, the Congressional Black Caucus and the Vera Institute of Justice hosted a virtual roundtable and a QA to discuss how local and federal leaders are contributing to historic crime declines and present a proactive vision of public safety. The conversation was moderated by Vera President Aisha Rahman and featured U.S. Rep. Summer Lee, U.S. Rep. Chantel Brown, Baltimore Mayor Brandon M. Scott, Newark Mayor Ross Baraka, and Durham Mayor Leonardo Leo Williams. I'm not going to read everything here. I just wanted to read what Vera President Aisha Rahman said. It said, crime rates continue to fall across the country to historic lows thanks to bold, community-first approaches to public safety like the ones discussed in this article today. While the Trump administration continues its assault on immigrants and cities, while simultaneously gutting programs that we know increase safety, local and federal leaders, specifically black leaders, like Rep. Summer Lee, Rep. Chantel Brown, and Mayor Scott, Baraka, and Williams, are charting a path forward for all to follow. Their serious approach to safety is a model for how we can prevent crime before it happens and continue to help communities thrive. So, This is on the Congressional Black Caucus website. I did find this link on the nbcit.org page, as they do have news and what have you. Let's see. A little bit more positive black news. Now, I haven't been following Keisha Lance Bottoms like that, but on the CBS News webpage, it says America's first black U.S. Attorney General endorses Keisha Lance Bottoms as redistricting battles reshape the South. Former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, the nation's first black Attorney General, has endorsed Democratic gubernatorial candidate Keisha Lance Bottoms, lending one of the Democratic Party's most recognizable voices on voting rights and redistricting to Georgia's closely watched governor's race. And you can go and finish reading this article here, but yeah, it looks like we're beginning to come together. So let us do the things we need to do to become a unit again. But yeah, so this is where we are as far as things are concerned. All right, so let us go ahead and get into our subject matter for tonight. Let us jump into what we're going to discuss. You see the title of the video is Ashkenazim Deserve Respect. And I honestly believe that they do deserve our respect. But this is what we're going to be really dealing with here tonight.
There was once a Jewish kingdom so powerful it stopped the spread of Islam. Almost no one talks about it. A massive empire stretching from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea for over 300 years. They were not born Jewish. Around 740 CE, their king, King Bulan, made one of the most extraordinary decisions in history. He converted to Judaism, not Christianity, not Islam, Judaism. He built synagogues. He established yeshivot. He invited scholars from Baghdad and Constantinople to teach Torah and Talmud to his people. Why Judaism? Because the Khazars were surrounded by two superpowers, the Christian Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphate. Choosing Judaism was a power move, a declaration of independence. For centuries, Khazaria stood as a buffer between East and West. Their armies stopped Arab expansion cold. Then the Rus came. By 969 CE, the empire was gone, destroyed, scattered to history. But the story of a Turkic king who chose the Torah and built a kingdom around it is one of the most remarkable chapters in all of Jewish history, and most people have never heard it. Drop a Star of David in the comments if this blew your mind. Follow for more hidden stories.
Imposters that the Bible talked about. There was this mass conversion in the 8th century.
That would mean that they're not Semitic.
There's this viral theory claiming that Ashkenazi Jews like Gal Gadot, Bibi Netanyahu, or even your favorite comedians aren't actually descendants from ancient Israelites, but rather they come from this medieval empire called Khazaria.
The Khazarians mass converted to Judaism. These people are not Jewish.
The true Semitic people are Palestinians.
If this is true, it flips history upside down, erasing the Jewish people's direct link to ancient Israel, exposing Ashkenazi Jews as imposters, and undermining the very basis of Zionism. But here's the thing, the theory is terribly flawed. If the Khazars really converted in mass, we'd see some remnants or traces, synagogues, Jewish texts, inscriptions, something. But there's nothing. The only mentions are a few scattered medieval references, and even those don't describe millions of people converting. At most, they suggest the king and his court may have adopted Judaism, but there was no mass conversion. If Ashkenazi Jews really came from a Central Asian empire, we'd see it in the language they speak. But Ashkenazi Jews spoke Yiddish, a mix of German, Aramaic, and Hebrew. There's no trace of Khazar or Turkic influence in any Jewish texts, prayers, or records of daily speech. So unless millions of people just woke up one day and forgot their native tongue, this theory doesn't hold up. And then there's the science. Over 20 years of peer-reviewed genetic studies all point to the same conclusion. Ashkenazi Jews share deep genetic roots with the Middle Eastern populations, the same markers found in Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews, not Central Asian converts. Wait, so if Ashkenazi Jews really trace back to the Middle East, why do so many of them look lighter skinned, especially if they've mostly married within their communities for centuries? That's a video for next time. Follow for more.
There was once a Jewish kingdom so powerful it stopped the spread of Islam into Europe.
So
Almost no one talks about it. The Khazars ruled a massive
when it
empire
comes
stretching from the
to
Black Sea to the Caspian Sea for over 300 years.
when it comes to these things that we're looking at here, the Ashkenazi Jews, I can honestly say that when I was a kid, the one thing I hated most was actually trying to explain to my parents why they should ignore reports on my behavior that they were receiving from adults in the neighborhood. You know, their infamous line was, of course, "So you calling these grown people a liar?" And immediately I would say no, because if I ever moved my mouth like I was going to say yes, a nice and quick backhand was headed for my lips. Because in the South, in the 80s especially, it was a sin to say that an adult was a liar. And over time, I got a little more skillful with my words, as I'm sure we all had to learn how to do at one point or another. And when dealing with authority especially, and when asked if I was calling an adult or a teacher a liar, I would say, I'm not calling them a liar, they just made a mistake. Now, this allowed me to keep my lips intact while also giving me room to state my case, because my mama, she was fast with that backhand. And don't misunderstand me though, I was not an angel, and I didn't pretend to be. I was respectful to the adults, but with my peers, I was mischievous. I could be destructive, and sometimes it didn't take much for me to be mean or to take no regard for other people's feelings. So sometimes the information that was conveyed to my mom really did warrant the "I'ma cut your behind and I'ma tell your daddy when he get home." But still, even in some of those instances, I needed my mom to know that I did what I was being accused of, but the seriousness that was expressed by the neighborhood prosecutors needed to be challenged. And sometimes I could even enlist an adult to help exonerate me, but in most of those cases, I had to either take the sentence that was handed down or do my best to represent myself in the case of young T. Edge versus the neighborhood. Most of the time, I lost, and I went to bed knowing that I had been unjustly punished, but I also took solace in knowing that at least I told the truth. Now, I didn't tell the truth because I was a good kid who had a heart for redemption. I told the truth because I was a terrible liar. Not only was I a terrible liar, but my little young conscience would also eat at me until I spilled the truth. Some lies I was able to hold on to, if I'm being honest, but those rare instances usually came from a twisted sense of loyalty given the ignorance of time. Just GP. Still to this day, I can't tell a lie. I mean, I can tell a lie, but I can't tell a lie and keep it myself without it coming out, because living in an untruth is quite unbearable. And with that being the case, as one who stands for truth as a minister of the gospel, I feel obligated to tell a full story. I can't give people a discarded history just because it's uncomfortable. This is why on this channel, I talk about the things I talk about. In my 20s, I constantly prayed to God to teach me the things I need to know in order to be a good leader. I understood that truth in leadership garners respect. That's a life principle that seems to be overlooked these days. But truth tellers, in general, gain the respect of the masses. I mean, look at the current administration we got. The person that is our leader got voted in because he was determined to be someone who told the truth. I mean, regardless of how we feel about him now. And as I felt the call to ministry, I continued to pray, asking God to teach me and to make me into the leader he would have me to be. I remember nights before apps and iPads, I would have a Bible, a commentary, a concordance, and a notebook with a pen, going at it for hours, doing word studies, digging into geographies, trying to understand the histories. And as my journey has progressed and I've encountered God, and he's taught me a thing or two and given me a few insights, as well as guided me to texts and writings, I'm obligated to tell the truth. I can't sit on the truth just because it's not what the old people taught. Likewise, I can't not say that the old tellers of truth were mistaken if they gave us truth based on bias and not based in fact. So, in that, although I do believe they still deserve respect because they open the doors for inquiry, that respect doesn't warrant continuing in the mistake. That's why I can honestly say that the Ashkenazim deserve respect, and at the same time show you the history and the truth. I choose not to conspire with, placate, condone, or ingratiate any racist, religious, or fringe organizations just for the sake of gaining a platform. I'm not opposed to being challenged, but I am opposed to belittlement. I think it's a bad look when well-known organizations spend capital on destroying people's lives and calling it preventive measures when they themselves are so well connected to the government that no one can even breathe in their direction without an investigation being done. When you are a perpetual victim, in theory, and not because of continued prejudicial treatment, you cross the line from being protectors of your communities to becoming the oppressors of everyone outside of your communities. You absolutely must allow truth in all situations, even if it's uncomfortable. Where truth is infringed upon, you should intervene. And in that intervention, you should establish an accurate record so that we are left with the truth that governs the annals of academia. So for tonight, the scripture that I want to kind of have in our mind's eye, if I may, is the scripture Isaiah 62, verses 6, 7, and 10 through 14. It says, I have set watchmen upon thy walls, O Jerusalem. They shall never hold their peace, day nor night. Ye that are Jehovah's remembrancers, take ye no rest, and give him no rest, till he establish, until he make Jerusalem a praise in the earth. Go through the gates, prepare ye the way of the people. Cast up the highway, gather out the stones, lift up an ensign for the peoples. Behold, Jehovah hath proclaimed unto the end of the earth. Say ye to the daughter of Zion, behold, thy salvation cometh. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. And they shall call them the holy people, the redeemed of Jehovah. And thou shalt be called sought out, a city not forsaken. So, with all that, we are currently living in a time when everyone is calling the Ashkenazi Jews Khazars. I'm not familiar with the book, and I can't remember the author, but I think the title of it is something like The 13th Tribe, where the author goes into, and I think the author is someone of Ashkenazi heritage, but they go into this understanding that the Ashkenazi Jews descend from a Khazar or a Khazarian tribe or state or whatever you want to call it, that converted to Judaism. Now, I may get it wrong, but I believe the story goes that King Bulan was looking for a religion to convert to. He called in a Muslim, he called in a Christian, and he called in Jewish leadership. And in the end, he settled on Judaism. And so the story goes that this Khazar kingdom converted to Judaism, and this is where the Ashkenazis descend from. But I, after doing research, have a different understanding of where the Khazars come from. So tonight, we might be here for a while. I'm not going to apologize at all, maybe to myself, because, like I said, it's late, and I really want to do this well, and I'm getting the hang of this going live thing. So, hopefully things will come off pretty well, and this will be a good time, especially if you're a history buff. If you're someone who is really invested in this idea of who are the Ashkenazi Jews, especially in a time where we black people are claiming to have some Hebrew heritage. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, and this is up your alley, then I hope we have a good time here tonight. I apologize, I don't have the chat live, so I'm not able to interact on the chat on my screen here. I do have my mobile device open, so we can go from there. But at any rate, so the claim of the Ashkenazi Jews today is that they are genetically connected to the people of the Middle East, or people of Levant. Now, the very first mention that I would have with that is we do a terrible job at reading scripture. We have done a terrible job of explaining how the scripture is laid out, because we have fallen in line with linguists who have given us a story or painted a picture for us based on language. But if we go off of scripture tells us that the people of the Middle East are not the people of Shem. The people of the Middle East are the people of Ham. But still, in that regard, when it comes to the Ashkenazi Jews, they have told us that they descend from, or have an ancestral tie to, the Middle East. And if they did, they would be Hamite. But I want to take a look at this paper. And I think this is the paper that we have looked at before. Let me see if I can get it to come open here. All right. It's taking me a little second here. Again, I am building this thing as we fly it. So let us take a look at this paper. I believe you can see my screen. All right. The Genomic History of the Bronze Age Southern Levant. So we've discussed this paper just a couple weeks ago. Let's see if my highlights are still in here. Here we go. So they had to change the Levantine they had to change this QP-ADM admixture test that they were going with, because they didn't account for, one, the sub-Saharan DNA that was in the Levant. But this is the part I wanted to get to here. It says, estimating the ancestry proportions in present-day Middle Eastern populations with substantial sub-Saharan African admixture, as well as multiple sources of admixture from different parts of the Mediterranean, is difficult. We address the problem by developing two statistical techniques and then testing the robustness of our inference on the basis of comparison between these methods. Simulations and perturbations of the input. We examine 14 present-day populations that are historically or geographically linked to the southern Levant, and tested the contributions of East Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, combining southern Levant Bronze Age populations and Zagros-related Chalcolithic ones to their ancestry. We found that both Arabic-speaking and Jewish populations are comparable, with having more than 50% Middle Eastern-related ancestry. This does not mean that any of these present-day groups bear direct ancestry from people who lived in the in the Middle to Late Bronze Age Levant or in Chalcolithic Zagros. Rather, it indicates that they have ancestries from populations whose ancient proxy can be related to the Middle East. Now, before I go into this last part, I wanna make the point here that when they talk about when they say this sentence here, we found that both Arabic-speaking and Jewish populations are compatible with having more than 50% Middle Eastern-related ancestry. This statement is not saying that the Ashkenazi Jews have ancestry with those people in the Middle East. This is saying that the current populations that live there, that are actually brother and sister clades, Arabic speaking, and populations that are deemed to be Jewish because of the language that they speak, these are the populations that they're saying have more than 50% Middle Eastern related ancestry. When you're looking at these type of documents, you really have to pay attention to the wording, because if you don't pay attention to the wording, then you can't get wrapped up or entangled. And plus, the beautiful thing about AI now, you can copy the paper, throw it in AI, and get AI to summarize it, and then you can ask questions to AI about everything that is in the paper, and it can pretty much explain it to you. But I want to go ahead and look at this this last highlighted part. It says the Zagros or Caucasian related ancestry flow into the region apparently continued after the Bronze Age. We also see an Eastern African related ancestry entering the region after the Bronze Age with an approximate south to north gradient. In addition, we observe a European related ancestry with the opposite gradient of north to south. So the Zagros and Caucasian, again, you got to look at the terminology. When we look at Caucasian today, we automatically think European. But in this case, Caucasian is referring to the inhabitants of the Caucasus Mountains. So it's saying that the people of the Zagros Mountains and Caucasus Mountains ancestry flow into the region, and it continues after the Bronze Age. Now, I believe that the Caucasus is the northernmost part, or should I say the northwesternmost part to the land of Canaan. That's why this gene flow is going in and out from before and since the Bronze Age. As far as the European related ancestry, it shows that this DNA is coming in from the north to the south. It's not spreading out. It's not coming up from the lower parts of the Arabian Peninsula. It's not coming from the west, where they believe that North Africans have European DNA. It's not coming from the east, where the Asians. No, this DNA, European-related ancestries, come strictly from north to south, meaning these people have entered into this territory. They are not the natural inhabitants of this territory. It says, given the difficulties in separating the ancestry components arriving from the south or southern Levant and the Zagros, an important direction for future work will be to reconstruct in high resolution the ancestry trajectories of each present-day group, and to understand how people from the southern Levant Bronze Age mixed with other people in later periods in the context of processes known from the rich archaeological and historical record of the last 3 millennia. So again, this paper shows that the European Jews are not Middle Eastern. Have they been coming into the Middle East? Yes. History books tell us during periods of the Crusaders, especially, they were coming in fighting against the enemies of Christ. So there is a history of Europeans always coming in and going out. Even when you read the Bible, there's a section in there where the King of Nations comes and fights against the kings of the Middle East, and they take Lot, who is Abram's nephew, and Abram has to go and take some young men with him to fight to get Lot back. So Europe has always had this coming into and leaving out of the Middle East. We know that the Greeks invaded the area of Iraq and Persia, and they essentially made a home in that area. So the Europeans have always been coming in and going out of this territory known as the Middle East, Near Asia, Western Asia, all other names that you can give it. So where do these Jews come from? Because they're not Khazars, they're not Middle Eastern people. Where do they come from? Well, this book we looked at the last time we were live. It is entitled The History of the Jews from the War with Rome to the Present Time. And here, let's see, I want to be able to maximize things. Says the Chassidim Jews in Poland, 17 through the 1800s. Frank Mendelssohn. And I hope I can control this properly as we read a few pages here. It says, from the times of the Maccabees, if not earlier, to those of the impostor Sabbatai Sevi, rabbinism had prevailed in the Jewish church. The only opposition had come from the Karaites, of whom we have already spoken, and they were but a small sect commanding little influence. So the Karaites were Jews who were against the rabbins because the rabbins used the Talmud, and the Karaite Jews were strictly Bible. They were strictly Torah. They didn't like to deviate. It says, eminent Jews again, such as Solomon ben Abraham of Montpellier in the 13th century, or Nathaniel Tribadi of Rome, or the more renowned Maimonides, might put forward opinions which the rabbins condemned, proceeding sometimes to the excommunication of the offending writers. But either the latter submitted or modified their opinions, or their judges reconsidered their decisions, and rabbinical theology continued in the main unaltered. But the followers of Sabbatai Sevi formed themselves into a distinct sect, calling themselves Jews indeed, and professing the principal doctrines of the Jewish faith, but differing from it, at the same time in the most essential particulars. So they call themselves Jews, professing the principal doctrines of the faith, but differing from it at the same time. It says his followers, as we may have seen, were not alienated. Let me see here. They were not alienated on apostasy or undeceived joy by his death. One prophet rose after another, who formed his own theological system, resembling Sabbatheism in the general outline, but having a peculiar and distinctive feature of its own. Most of these secured, during their lifetime, at all events, a large and enthusiastic following, while in some instances their teaching was adopted as a rule of faith long after they had passed away from earth. So leaders came and they went, and every time a new leader came, they had a massive, large following. Then when they passed on, those following might die out a little bit, but then another leader would arise, and so on and so forth. This is the same thing that was happening in rabbinism, by the way. It says, among these prophets, two of the most remarkable were Malach and Hajan. These men were two rabbins belonging, the one to a Polish, the other to a German synagogue, who AD 1700 had made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, there to announce the immediate coming of the Messiah. So here is the first mention in this book where we have the Polish and the Germans together. And this is significant. This is significant because these two groups make up the Ashkenazi Jewish sect of Judaism. Most of their companions died of want or fatigue on their journey, and nearly all the survivors, following the example of Sabbathi, went over to Islam or Islamism. But the two leaders, and especially Hajan, zealously propagated their opinions, notwithstanding the most determined opposition of the rabbins of Jerusalem and Constantinople. So we know that the rabbis of Jerusalem and Constantinople, these different sects had been, how can I say, Christianized, because Constantine and all of that. I'm not going to get into Constantine. It says, amongst the doctrines preached by Hajan was that of a trinity of gods, though the three were perfect in their unity. This dogma, very nearly coinciding, if not identical, with the Catholic doctrine of the Trinity he professed to find in the book of Zohar. So, again, this is just to show that there was a sect known as Sabbatheism. Now, this is where I want us to look right here. If I can, all right. It says, and another and more important sect, appearing at least to derive its origin from Sabbatheism, is that of the Chassidim, which established itself chiefly in Poland, Galatia, and Russia. This is, according to a well-known writer of the present day, the religion of nearly all the Jews in Galatia, Hungary, southern Russia, and Wallachia. Its founder was one Israel Belshem, who first appeared in Podolia in 1740. He claimed to be the representative of God on earth, and as such, his commands were to be obeyed with implicit submission. His early history is full of fable, wild, extravagant tales being told of it, which are unworthy of repetition. The Orthodox rabbins say he was a man of mean rank and extraction, possessed of no real ability, and who affected sanctity and mystery in order to impress his followers. His certain supernatural power was invariably claimed by the students of Kabbalism, but those assumed by Israel had apparently no limit. He could absolve from all sin. He could cure all diseases by his simple command. He could work the most stupendous miracles. He was endowed with all knowledge, not only of the past, but of the future also. The main drift of his teaching, let me go back. Give me a second here. All right. The main drift of his teaching, which entirely rejected the Talmud as a rabbinical tradition, was the necessity of learning by continual contemplation and self-mortification the true nature of God, and also of entire submission to the Zadokim, or priesthood. We are told by Dr. McCall that they are in the habit of spending every Sabbath with their Zadik, coming in for the purpose from many miles round, bringing them provisions for the meals of the day, as well as presents for the Zadik. They consult him in all difficulties, accepting his replies as inspired by heaven, arrange their affairs, and compose their quarrels. All right, I'm not going to read anymore, but so we see that the Chassidim, or what we know today as the Orthodox Jews, the Hasidic Jews, come from a sect that they believe descends from Sabbatheism, that was led by one named Israel Belshem. It says his sect, Israel Belshem, his sect was, let's see, it says his sect was nearly all the Jews in Galatia, Hungary, southern Russia, and Wallachia. Now, this isn't the only writing about the Chassidim. There's actually another full pamphlet on the Chassidim. And as you can see, it says it's a paper read before the Jews College Literary Society, November 13th, 1887. So this is not just, again, some little fringe writing that some black person came up with. I know a lot of things get blamed on black people, or gets blamed on people who are just trying to make a name for themselves. But this is actually from 1887, and it was read before the College Literary Society. Now, the only thing about this, I'm not going to read all of this. I did have this book had a lot of notations on my other profile, but of course when I open it over here, it doesn't show all of those highlights. But you can go through this book. It tells you exactly about Belshem. Here, I see this part right here that talks specifically about its founder. It says, the founder of the sect was one Israel Belshem, and the story of his parentage, birth, and childhood, and the current anecdotes of his subsequent career play a considerable part in Chassidic literature, or Hasidic literature. But the authentic materials for his biography are everywhere interwoven with much that is pure legend and with much more that is miraculous. This was perhaps inevitable, and is certainly not an unfamiliar feature in the personal histories of religious reformers as presented by their followers and devotees. The sayings and doings of Belshem are an essential, perhaps the most essential, portion of any account of the sect. For Belshem is the center of the Chassidic world, and Chassidism is so intimately bound with the personality of its founder that any separation between them is well nigh impossible. The Chassidim Belshem is not a man who established a theory or set forth a system. He himself was the incarnation of a theory, and his whole life the revelation of a system. Even those portions of his history which are plainly legendary have their uses in indicating the ideals and in illustrating the aspirations of the early Chassidim, while their circulation and the ready credence they receive are valuable evidence of the real power and influence of Belshem's personality. In the tale, as told by the sect, little is omitted of those biographical accessories which are proper to an avatar. There is all the conventional heralding of a preordained advent, all the usual signs and portents of a new dispensation may be recognized in the almost preternatural virtues of Belshem's parents and the miraculous annunciation and exceptional circumstances of his nativity, and in the early indication of a strong and fearless individuality. Everywhere it seems to be the suggestion that Belshem, from his infancy, was conscious of a lofty mission. It is already in tender years that he is made to give evidence of an indifference to conventional restraints and accepted ideals. Rabbi Eliezer and his wife, the parents of Belshem, dwelt as the story goes, in Moldavia. They are described as pious and a God-fearing couple. Let's see. I have to be careful here because I don't want it to jump on me or switch pages. Okay, they were a God-fearing couple, and they had already reached an old age, and had reached old age, were still childless. They are credited with the spoil less rectitude, which was unimpaired by a long series of strange vicissitudes and misfortunes. Ultimately, an angel of God appeared to Eliezer and announced that as he had successfully withstood all the temptations and sufferings by which he had been tried, God was about to reward him with a son who was destined to enlighten the eyes of all Israel. Therefore, his name should be Israel, for in him the words of Scripture were to be fulfilled. Thou art my servant Israel, in whom I will be glorified. In due course the promise was fulfilled, and to the aged couple a son was born, who was named Israel according to the angel's word. The date of Belshem's birth is about 1700. His birthplace, a hitherto unidentified village in Bukovina, which the authorities call Ukop. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Then belonging still to Romania. The child's mother died soon after he was weaned, and his father did not long survive her. But before Eliezer died, he took his child in his arms, and blessing him, bade him fear not, for God will always be with you. As Eliezer had been greatly honored in the community in which he lived, his orphan son was carefully tended and educated. He was early supplied with an instructor to the holy law. But though he learned with rare facility, he rejected the customary methods of instruction. One day, while still quite young, his teacher missed him, and on seeking, found him sitting alone in the forest that skirted his native village, in happy and fearless solitude. He repeated this escape so often that it was thought best to leave him to follow his own bent. A little later, we find him engaged as assistant to a schoolmaster. His duty was not to teach, but to take the children from their homes to the synagogue, and thence on to school. It was his wont while accompanying the children to the synagogue to teach them the solemn hymns which he sang with them. In the synagogues he encouraged them to sing the responses, so that the voices of the children penetrated through the heavens and moved the divine Father to compassion. Satan, fearing lest his power on earth should thereby be diminished, assumed the shape of a werewolf, and appearing before the procession of children on their way to the synagogue, put them to flight. In consequence of this alarming incident, the children's service was suspended. But Israel, recollecting his father's counsel to fear not, besought the parents to allow to lead the children once more in the old way. His request was granted, and when the werewolf appeared a second time, Israel attacked him with a club and routed him. In his 14th year, Israel became a beadle at the Beth Hamidrash. Here he assiduously but secretly pursued the study of the law. Yet, being anxious that none should know his design, he read and worked only at night, when the schoolroom was empty, and the usual scholars had retired. During the daytime he slept, so that he was popularly believed to be both ignorant and lazy. Despite these precautions, however, his true character was revealed to one person. A certain holy man, the father of a young student at the college, had discovered some old manuscripts which contained the deepest secrets. Before his death, he bade his son repair to Ukop, Israel's birthplace, telling him that he would find one Israel, son of Eliezer, to whom the precious documents were to be entrusted. They possess, so the old man declared, a certain mystic and heavenly affinity with Israel's soul. The student carried out his father's instructions, and at last discovered the object of his search in the beetle of Beth Hamidrash. Israel admitted him to his friendship and confidence on the condition of secrecy as to his real character. The students, however, paid dearly for this acquaintance with Israel. Contrary to Belshem's advice, he entered upon a dangerous incantation, in the course of which he made a mistake so serious that it cost him his life. So here we have this account of Israel Belshem. He was something like John the Baptist, where his father was this old man who didn't have a son, and in their old age, in his parents' old age, they gave birth to this child after being encountered by an angel. So this is where the Hasidic Jews come from. This is the origin story to their leadership. Again, Belshem was born somewhere around 1700. Now, if you remember what we talked about or what we discussed last week, the Inquisition had pushed the Sephardic Jews or the Black Portuguese into slavery. We know slavery started 1500, 1501, and here we see that 1700 a different sect of Jews arose. Now, this is my question, and this is an honest question. How do we think that these Jews became acquainted with many of the scriptures and the like? Well, the simple answer is that when the Jews were expelled from Spain and Portugal and all other European territories, they were running and finding different places where they could hide. So they were setting up these communities everywhere they went. It's not a far-fetched understanding to believe that there were Jewish sects, S-E-C-T, in Poland. Now, I believe, and this is just my opinion, I believe that these Jews were intermarrying and they were making children with men and women who were not of their stock. And that's how we began seeing lighter Jews in these certain places. So again, I believe that the Ashkenazi Jews do deserve respect, because although we have fanatical tales about their leadership, I can understand where they would arise from. Now, the name Ashkenaz comes from the territory. It's no secret. If you go and look through all of these different historical records of Europe, it's plain that even they believe that they are the sons of Japheth. So the territory of southern Russia, if I'm not mistaken, Germany, those places are considered to be the lands of Ashkenaz. So this is not some derogatory understanding or some way to push them into the outside of things. It's just to make an understanding of a truth. Again, like I said, I believe in telling the truth wholeheartedly. And if I make a mistake, I believe that there should definitely be some type of correction done or conversation had so that we can correct those mistakes and put a truthful record out to the masses so that there's not this misunderstanding of what's going on. But let us continue here. So, again, we had the Jews running all throughout Europe. If we go back to this book, The History of the Jews, and we go to the let's go back to the table of contents. If we look at the table of contents, we can see that the Jews were everywhere in Europe. They ran everywhere they could possibly go in Europe. They were in the East. They were in Spain, in France, the Far East. We have England, Spain, Germany, Hungary. Again, England, France, Germany, Italy, the Low Countries, which is Holland, Asia and Africa, even Central Europe. So when it comes to and here, even specifically in Poland, as we read already. So when we look at this history of the Jews, they were running everywhere to try to find some peace, man. They were being persecuted at every turn, and it was no secret. But let's look at the Jews in Holland in the 1600s. Let's see here. Let's close some of this stuff off so that we don't get ourselves all right. 1800s in England. During this century, no market change of any kind took place in the position of the English Jews, though their affairs several times came before the notice of the legislature. They had obtained under the stewards liberty to carry on their public worship, to practice all trades and professions, and hold all property, except such as was not permitted to aliens. None of these privileges were withdrawn or modified during the 18th century or the 1700s. On the other hand, the Jews were not naturalized, could not possess land, could not hold any public office of whatsoever kind, were not in any real sense English citizens. Yet it was evident they regarded themselves as permanent settlers in the country. Again, 1700s. This was after slavery had begun. They began to build synagogues and to establish schools, hospitals, and other charitable foundations for the benefit of their community. It should be noted that as in Holland, so in England also, there were two classes of Jews. The German and Polish, called the Ashkenazim, and the Spanish and Portuguese. These were known as the Sephardim. It said, these agree in their religious opinions, but in other matters differ considerably from each other. And it is said that intermarriages between them were for a long time rare. The last named were the first to erect a synagogue, which was opened in 1662 in King Street, Aldgate. In 1676, a larger synagogue had to be provided, and a third was built 3 years later. This stands in Bevis Marks and remains to this day, but little changed in appearance. In 1703, the Jews' hospital was opened, which now stands in Mile End Road. In 1730, a girls' school was built by Isaac de Costa, and called after his name. In 1735, another school for general education was set up and endowed by Ruiz Lamingo. The German and Polish Jews did not settle in England for a generation later. They were, on the whole, inferior in respect of culture and education, as well as less wealthy than their Spanish brethren. They provided themselves with a place of worship about the beginning of the last century. It was enlarged in 1722. The present Hamburg Synagogue was erected in 1726 and Great Synagogue in Duke Street, 1763. All right, apologies for that abrupt pause. Had to take care of something real quick. But let's pick up where we left off. It says the present Hamburg Synagogue was erected in 1726 and the Great Synagogue in Duke Street, 1763. Again, slavery had already been going on. At this point, slavery had been in effect for over 200 years. So with these Jews, these present day Jews were either converts to Christianity who didn't look the part of the black Portuguese, or they were converts altogether. But it says the first legislation of the century respecting the Jews was in 1703, when an act was carried obliging the Jews to make provision for any members of their family who might become converts to Christianity. This was passed in consequence of the action of a wealthy Jew whose daughter had been baptized. immediately after which he turned her out of doors in a state of entire destitution. So he kicked her out. Not long after, the question of their naturalization began for the first time to be agitated. A proposal was made to the treasurer Godolphin in Queen Anne's time to purchase the town of Brentford. Oh, give me a second here. Purchase the town of Brentford for occupation. Let me see. To purchase the town of Brentford for their occupation, the purchase carrying with it the full rights of citizenship. Godolphin was urged by influential persons to accept it, but he foresaw the opposition which both the merchants and the clergy would offer to it and declined the proposal. So I'm not going to go through all of this. Just wanted to show that now we have history showing us the Ashkenazi Jews alongside the Sephardic Jews. In this instance, when they're mentioned together, slavery has been going on for 200 years. So we're now seeing Jews, but not the black Portuguese or the dark-skinned Jews that history had been accustomed to seeing. So where did the German Jews come from? Because I've made mention that the Ashkenazi Jews, or this in his writing has also just told us that the Ashkenazi Jews are made up of the Polish and the German Jews. So where does history give an account of where these German Jews come from? Let's see. Close a few things off here. In this book, The History of the Jews, let me see, I didn't write the name of the book down. On what page is this? On page 40 and 41. So it says, oh, here we go. The History of the Jews from the revolt against the Zendik, 511 CE, to the capture of St. John de Acre by the Mahometans in 1291 CE. So let us get back to page 40. Man, the crazy thing about this, these books from Google being digitized, the page numbers are off. So if you're not used to looking at it, man, you'll think that you done messed up something. But anyway, not to get sidetracked. Starting at the bottom on page 40. We blow it up so it can be seen. It says, the Jews of Germany are to be regarded merely as colonies of the Frankish Jews, and such of them as lived in Austrasia, a province subject to the Merovingian kings. So let me read that again. The Jews of Germany are to be regarded merely as colonies of Frankish Jews, and such of them as lived in Austrasia, a province subject to the Merovingian kings, share the same fate as their brethren in France. So remember we talked about the Jews in France, the Jews in France last week, how in France they had no regard for how terribly they treated the Jews. Anybody who killed a Jew didn't have to answer for it, and judges and magistrates were encouraged to even turn a blind eye to any such matter. So it mentions here that the German Jews had suffered the same fate as their brethren in France. It says, according to a chronicle, The most ancient Jews in the Rhine district are said to, according to the Chronicle, the most ancient Jews in the Rhine district are said to have been the descendants of legionaries who took part in the destruction of the temple. From the vast horde of Jewish prisoners, the Vengiani had chosen the most beautiful women, had brought them back to their stations on the shores of the Rhine and the Main, and had compelled them to minister to the satisfaction of their desires. The children thus begotten of Jewish and Germanic parents were brought up by their mothers in the Jewish faith, their fathers not troubling themselves about them. It is these children who are said to have been the founders of the first Jewish communities between Worms and Mainz. It is certain that a Jewish congregation existed in the Roman colony, the city of Cologne, long before Christianity had been raised to power by Constantine. The heads of the community and its most respected members had obtained from the heathen emperors the privilege of exemption from the onerous municipal offices. The first Christian emperor, however, narrowed the limits of this immunity, exempting only 2 or 3 families. So again, this writing tells us that the German Jews descend from the legionaries who took part in the destruction of the temple in 70 AD is what they're talking about. It says, from the vast horde of Jewish prisoners, the Vengiani had chosen the most beautiful women, had brought them back to their stations on the shores of the Rhine and the Main, and had compelled them to minister to the satisfaction of their desires. The children thus begotten of Jewish and Germanic parents were brought up by their mothers in the Jewish faith, their fathers not troubling themselves about them. So, again, here we see that the Jews are not just concentrated in one place in Europe, but also that not all the Jews came to Europe under the same pretenses. In this case, the story goes that some of the soldiers had taken some of the women that were prisoners, the most beautiful of the Jewish women, and brought them back to the Rhine, which is a river in that territory where they lived, and they pretty much had children with them, discarded them, and made them raise the children in the Jewish faith. Now, I don't want to, how can I say? I don't want to sound like I'm being, I don't want to sound like I don't have any type of regard for Jewish people. I don't want to sound like I'm discrediting their existence. I'm trying to be careful because I like I said, I want to say it with all honesty. Again, I didn't give my disclaimer at the beginning of this. I believe that everybody is free to worship any way that they please. No one should tell a Jew that they can't be a Jew, what have you. So that was my bad from the start. But one thing that we hear about being a Jew, especially Ashkenazic Jew, the way that one becomes an Ashkenazic Jew is by having a mother who is a Jew. I'm gonna say that again. The way that we're told a Jew becomes a Jew is if he comes from a mother who is a Jew. Excuse me. And in this day and age, it's been modified a bit because even someone who is born to a woman that converts to Judaism, even if she's in no way related to the Hebrews from a bloodline standpoint, all she has to do is convert to Judaism, and that child born to her is considered a Jew. Now, did this history of the Jews here, tell us that this principle of Judaism comes from the fact that Jewish mothers who were pretty much taken during the destruction of the temple and given children or made to rear children to these German men are the reason that there are Jews on the Rhine. Excuse me. Now, I don't believe this story wholeheartedly, but I believe that there's some truth to it, because this is in the book of the history of the Jews. This is their writing. This is a book that has come down about the Jewish history. So children born to a Jewish mother is how they become Jews. And this writing just told us, or tells us, where that principle first originated. And so this is where one of the major histories should be noted. This is where one of the major histories should be noted, because the Rothschilds descend from these German Jews. The Rothschild family descends from these German Jews. It says, I went and I jumped on Google AI and I asked Google, I said, when did the Rothschild family become Jews? And the return was that the Rothschild family did not convert to Judaism. They have always been Jewish. Their recorded lineage traceably begins in the Jewish ghetto in Judengasse of Frankfurt, Germany, where they lived as a Jewish family for centuries before achieving global prominence. And then it goes into the origins in the Frankfurt ghetto. In the 1500s, the earliest known ancestors of the family were recorded living in Frankfurt's strictly segregated Jewish quarter. The house name that they grew up in the 1560s, their ancestor named Isaac Elkanan built a house in the ghetto known as the Haus zum Rottenschild. And I apologize, I'm not German, so if that sounded terrible, charge it to my head and not my heart, because I'm not German. But I did my best. I'm going to do it again. Haus zum Roten Schild, or House of the Red Shield, which gave the family its prominent surname. It says, for generations they lived under severe legal restrictions placed on Jewish residents of Frankfurt, including limits on movement, professions, and property ownership. It says their rise to prominence. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, who lived from 1744 to 1812, the founding father of the banking dynasty, started his career as a dealer in rare coins and metals in the Frankfurt ghetto. It says through his financial skill, he became a court Jew, or a financial agent for nobility, eventually sending his 5 sons to establish banking hubs across Europe, in London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. Throughout their rise to immense wealth in the 19th century and up to the present day, the family maintained their Jewish faith, identity, and communal traditions. So, excuse me. So the Rothschilds are slated to be non-converts. They are Jews of old who have their first ancestor to build in the ghetto in Germany a home in the 1500s, just after slavery had begun, and to this day it says that they've maintained their Jewish identity, their faith, and their communal traditions. So I went a little deeper, and I started going through who the Rothschilds were, and I got to Moses Kalman Rothschild, who lived from about 1685 to 1735. He was born in Judengasse, which is that ghetto that we just read about. Let's see, and it shows that he died on October 19, 1735, at about the age of 50 years old. Let's see, and it goes into his biography. It says he was born, okay, we went through that. The residence of the family was Hinterhausen Fun, Judengasse 188, to which his ancestors had moved in 1664. The old residence was a house in the southern part of Judengasse called Zumbraten, which had been built in the 16th century by Isaac Elkanan Rothschild. The name is derived from the German Zumbraten, meaning at the red shield, in reference to the house where the family lived for many generations. As was often the case, the family had derived its surname from the name of the house. The name Rothschild was retained when the family removed to the northern part of Judengasse. It says Moses Kalman passed away on the 19th of October 1735 at the age of 49 in the Frankfurt Jewish ghetto of Judengasse. So here we have Moses Kalman Rothschild. All right, so I wanted to go and take a look at this ghetto. What about this ghetto does history give an account? It says the Frankfurter Judengasse, or Jews Lane, was a Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt and one of the earliest ghettos in Germany. It existed from 1462 until 1811 and was home to Germany's largest Jewish community in early modern times. At the end of the 19th century, most of the buildings in the Judengasse were demolished. The area suffered major destruction during World War II, and reconstruction left no visible signs of the ghetto in today's townscape of Frankfurt. So it says at the end of the 19th century, which was the end of the 1800s, most of the buildings in the Judengasse were demolished. The area suffered a major destruction from World War II, and reconstruction left no visible signs of the ghetto in today's townscape of Frankfurt. So after Hitler got done wreaking havoc, then the reconstruction didn't leave any notice of what it used to look like. It says post-war usage of the area included a car park, a petrol station, and a wholesale flower market. The decision to build an administrative complex triggered a public discussion as to what should be done with the archaeological remains uncovered during the excavation in 1977. The foundations of 17 buildings were found, and 5 of these can be seen at the Museum Judengasse, which was incorporated into the new building. And then it goes into the location. The ghetto was located outside the city walls, east of the medieval city wall, and formed a slight curve from today's Konstablerwache or Brennerplatz near the River Main. The street was about 330 meters long, 3 to 4 meters wide, and had 3 town gates. The gates were locked at night as well as on Sundays and Christian holidays due to the narrow street and the limited access. The Judengasse was destroyed 3 times by fire in the 18th century alone, in 1711, 1721, and 1796. Initially, some 15 families of about 110 members lived in Frankfurt's Judengasse when they were forcibly removed from the city and relocated to the ghetto by decree of Friedrich III in 1462. By the 16th century, the number of inhabitants rose to over 3,000, living in 195 houses. The ghetto had one of the highest population densities in Europe. Contemporary documents describe it as narrow, oppressive, and dirty. Now, the 16th century was the 1500s. Again, this was the time when slavery was at its height. Now, we have a lot of, let me not say a lot, because I remember when I first started researching this about 10 years ago, I went on the South Carolina website to, because I had Googled something about mulattoes and slavery, and something on the South Carolina website had displayed something. I went and read that even in Charleston, when Negroes were getting off the slave ships, that there were mulattoes getting off those slave ships with them. And after I made a note of that, I went back and it had been taken down. So there are accounts, some are hidden apparently, that show that there were mulatto slaves being taken off of slave ships into slavery during the 1700s, 16 and 1700s. Now, again, when we looked at France last week, I showed you a map that pretty much laid out all the slave imports of Europe. All of those slave imports were from prominent Jewish communities in Europe. So I don't think it's coincidence that when we read about this ghetto in Germany, that we're seeing that they had packed 3,000 people into 195 houses during those times of persecution of the Jews. Now, this is another important thing that I want to make mention of, because and I meant to go and see if I could find this documentary that I saw a few years ago that talked specifically about the formation of ghettos in the U.S. And it made a reference to the ghettos as if it was a new project that had never been instituted before. But ghettos were common in Europe. The Jews were in ghettos from ages ago. So it wasn't something new to try. And I think because of our historic or our history in America and our historic societies, we are given a history that makes us look at history from a short-sighted view. We never really take a gander into history or peek into history with a well-rounded view of everything that happened, not only in America, but prior to the settlement of America. I mean, we get the general things like the wars where England or Britain took over America and that sort of thing. But we rarely get information about Europe. Although America was established to progress the European races, they don't do a good job of telling us about those European races, why they wanted to come to America, who they sent to America, why these certain people were sent to America. And I'm not going to speculate on that right now. That'll be something that maybe we talk about later on down the line. But for right now, just making a mention of the fact or the idea that the ghettos are not something that just popped up in America. And it's very to me it's very telling. It's very coincidental that the people who inhabit the ghettos in America are the black people from the beginning of time. The people who inhabit the ghettos have been black people. Certain places now, those ghettos are just, popular places where prominent black heroes and sheroes come from, and they're staples in the black community. But we don't really get to associate those histories. We don't really get to kind of look at where those things come from. So I think it's good to make mention here that these ghettos were in Germany. Now, again, I was talking about the Rothschild family. Now, we can clearly see that the Rothschilds family is a European family. But there's I think something that is that is good to take a look at here. Let's see if I can get this to come up. This paper, excuse me for one moment here. This paper is entitled The History of African Gene Flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. Get off of my screen. Hold on, y'all. All right. The history of African gene flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. And I'm just going to read the abstract. It says, the previous genetic studies have suggested a history of sub-Saharan African gene flow into some West Eurasian populations after the initial dispersal out of Africa that occurred at least 45,000 years ago. However, there has been no accurate characterization of the proportion of mixture or of its date. We analyze genome-wide polymorphism data from over 40 West Eurasian groups to show that almost all Southern Europeans have inherited 1% to 3% African ancestry, with an average admixture date of around 55 generations ago. Consistent with North African gene flow at the end of the Roman Empire and subsequent Arab migrations. I apologize. I didn't mean to say it like that, but subsequent Arab migrations. Levantine groups harbor 4% to 15% African ancestry, with an average admixture date of about 32 generations ago, consistent with close political, economic, and cultural links with Egypt in the late Middle Ages. We also detect 3% to 5% of sub-Saharan African ancestry in all 8 of the diverse Jewish populations that we analyzed. For the Jewish admixture, we obtained the average estimated date of about 72 generations. This may reflect descent of these groups from a common ancestral population that already had some African ancestry prior to the Jewish diasporas. So I'm going to read that last part again. It says, we also detect 3% to 5% sub-Saharan African ancestry in all 8 of the diverse Jewish populations that we analyzed. For the Jewish admixture, we obtain an average estimated date of about 72 generations. This may reflect descent of these groups from a common ancestral population that already had some African ancestry prior to Jewish diasporas. And again, this is a academically published paper. It was received August 4th, 2010. It was accepted March 14th of 2011, and it was published on April 21st of 2011. So this paper is academically published. This is an academic paper. This paper is telling us that there is sub-Saharan African DNA in all 8 of the Jewish populations that they analyzed. Now, granted, with these Jewish populations, as I stated in the first DNA paper that we looked at, we have to look to see if these Jewish populations are the populations that are currently in the Levant. But I want to make notice of this title: African gene flow into Southern Europeans, Levantines, and Jews. So Southern Europeans are the Italians, those races. Now, this is the crazy thing. After the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, Jews were taken into slavery. And hold on. I want to say this so you can see me clearly. After the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, Jews were taken into slavery in Rome. Many of us don't understand, or many of us have not realized that Rome was the capital of Italy. So when we start talking about Rome, when we discuss the things of the Roman Empire, we are talking about the Roman Empire of Europe, which was in Italy. When we look at these papers and it tells us that there's sub-Saharan African DNA in Southern Europe, and we look at the fact that there were Jews taken into slavery in Rome after 70 AD, and we know that there were prominent Jewish communities in Italy, in Rome, then we go further and we look and see that a lot of those Jewish people that were in Rome migrated from Italy into Germany. So when we're talking about the Rothschilds, when we're talking about the ghetto in Germany, when we're talking about those Jewish women, the most beautiful Jewish women who were taken into Germany on the Rhine, and these German soldiers gave them babies, impregnated them, I'll say it that way, and then left them to raise the children on their own. It's not far-fetched to believe that when we're talking about these Jewish ghettos in Germany, that these German Jews descend from the Jews from Italy and ultimately have African or sub-Saharan African specifically DNA. So again, just putting those pieces together. Again, this is just an opportunity to put pieces together. I'm doing the best I can to show a full breakdown, to give full respect to our Ashkenazi Jewish brethren, because they get a bad shake when it comes to a lot of black people who believe that we are the Hebrews. There was a point in time, I won't tell a lie that I was even questioning whether they were converts. But history bears out a different story. It tells us differently. It lets us know that these German Jews were not converts. But then when we go through the text and then we look at DNA, we understand that although they weren't converts and although they're white looking, that they do have sub-Saharan DNA. Now, let's go back here. So when it comes to the Rothschilds, after we had the Jews go through slavery, we had these German Jews who were put through the crucible during the time of slavery. And this is prior to us making it to the time of Hitler. We see that there was one Nathan Meyer Rothschild. Now, this is just the portrait of Mr. Rothschild. Let me click on that portrait real quick. I ain't going to say it, but I want you to look at this portrait. I ain't going to say it, but I want you to look at this portrait. I ain't gonna say it. I'm gonna let you look at this portrait. And let's just go back to reading about Mr. Rothschild. It says he was born the 16th of September, 1777, and he died July 28th of 1836. But he was known as Baron Nathan Meyer or Mayer Rothschild. He was a British German banker, businessman, and financier. Born in Frankfurt am Main, he was the third of 5 sons of Mayer Amschel Rothschild and his wife, Gutli, who was the founder of the British branch of the prominent Rothschild family. Early life origins in Frankfurt. Nathan Meyer Rothschild was born on September 16, 1777. It says his parents here in the Jewish ghetto area of Frankfurt in the Holy Roman Empire in present-day Germany. He was born to an Ashkenazi Jewish family. He was the third son, and his brothers were Amschel Meyer Rothschild, Solomon Meyer Rothschild, Karl Meyer Rothschild, and James Meyer Rothschild. All 5 brothers would go on to become close business partners spread out across Europe. They had 5 sisters, including Henriette Rothschild, who married Abraham Montefiore. So he moved to England and got involved in the textile trade. At the age of 21 in 1798, he settled in Manchester, England, and established a business in textile trading and finance. He later moved to London and began dealing on the London Stock Exchange from 1804. He made a fortune trading bills of exchange through a banking enterprise begun in 1805, dealing with financial instruments such as foreign bills and government securities. He became a Freemason of the Immolation Lodge number 21 of the Premier Grand Lodge of England in October of 1802 in London. Until this point, the few Ashkenazi Jews who lived in England tended to belong to the ancients, or this Freemason Lodge here, on account of their general lower social class, while the more established Sephardim joined the moderns. So now it goes into his gold securities traded with the Napoleonic Wars. And I think this is and I'm trying to build something here. I don't want you to think I'm just reading just to be reading. I'm building something here. I'm trying to get us to a point here. But it says in 1809 he began to deal in gold bullion and developed this as a cornerstone of his business, which was to become N.M. Rothschild and Sons. From 1811 on, in negotiation with Commissary General John Charles Henrys, he undertook a transfer of money to pay Wellington's troops on campaign in Portugal and Spain against Napoleon, and later to make subsidy payments to British allies when these organized new troops after Napoleon's disastrous Russian campaign. Let's see. Let me get to where I'm trying to get. Okay, it's in this section here. It says later, during the 1840s, as early socialists in France, again, France has come up, attacked the Rothschilds and Jewish financiers in general, a French socialist from among their circle, using the pen name Satan, authored a work entitled Histoire des Fontes et Curiosités de Rothschild, or Edifying and Curious History of Rothschild, the First King of the Jews. Within it, he made claims about Nathan Meyer Rothschild, early knowledge of the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo, whose couriers delivered information about the victory back to London before the British cabinet itself knew, claiming that he used the knowledge to speculate on the London Stock Exchange and make a vast fortune by unfair advantage against other British stockholders, essentially defrauding them. Now, it has a story here, but it's important to make note here that the Rothschilds, in particular, this particular gentleman named Nathan Rothschild, was very well connected. He was very well connected. He was very well connected in the European government because he was a financier. So he gave money for war supplies on this side. He gave money on that side. And the recounting of the Battle of Waterloo, it's not important because he made money. It's important because it said that he had the information about Napoleon's defeat before the government did. So that means he was well connected. He was able to relay information to the government on different war instances. Now, this particular Rothschild, let's see here. He had a grandson. Let's see. Is this the Rothschild? Is this his grandson that we're looking at here? Let's see. Nope. This is his son. This is his son. And I want us to look at what this book says. Again, this is that book, History of the Jews. Oh, I need to show you the book. I'm sorry. The History of the Jews from, let's see, The History of the Jews from the War with Rome to the Present Time is the name of this book. Let's see, what page is this? Page 350 at the bottom here. It says, in 1847, an important step was taken by the leaders of the Jewish emancipationists. At the general election in that year, Baron Lionel Rothschild offered himself as a candidate for the city of London and was returned. When the session of 1849 opened, Lord John Russell, then Premier, brought in a bill to omit from the parliamentary oath the words "on the true faith of a Christian," which rendered it impossible for a Jew to take it. The bill was carried by a majority of 66. It was then introduced into the House of Lords by the Earl of Carlisle, who urged that the Jews were now the only persons excluded from Parliament on account of their religious opinions. As uniformity of belief on religious subjects had ceased to be required as a condition of admission to the legislature, it was obviously unjust to exclude Jews on that ground. The bill was opposed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who argued that the measure was inconsistent with the national profession of Christianity, also by the Bishop of Exeter, who declared it to be a breach of the contract made between the sovereign and the nation, that the crown should maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel. On the other side, Archbishop Whately argued that the spirit of Christianity forbids us to require the imposition of civil penalties on those who differ from it. On a division, the bill was lost by a majority of 25. An attempt of a different character was now made to obtain the object desired. On the 26th of July, 1850, Baron Rothschild presented himself before the speaker to take the necessary oath, and when the clerk presented the New Testament, he said, "I desire to be sworn on the Old Testament." Sir R. Inglis rose to oppose this suggestion. The Baron was ordered to withdraw, and a long debate ensued. The opinion of the law officer of the Crown having been taken, the House resolved that Baron Rothschild could not take the oath except in the ordinary manner prescribed by the law. It was agreed, however, that another bill should be introduced for the relief of the Jews in the ensuing session. This was accordingly done. The bill was brought in and carried through by a reduced majority and was then set up to the Lords, by whom it was, as before, thrown out. Its rejection was followed by a second attempt similar to that of Baron Rothschild in the preceding year. Let's just get to the next page here, because I want you to know that this was an attempt for the Jews to be accepted in the legislature, legislation body, or the executive body of the English government. Again, remember, Jews could not hold any type of office all throughout Europe. But here was an opportunity to grasp station or to hold position in government. Let's see. It says, from the time until 1858, bills were repeatedly brought into the lower house and passed by majorities, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller, until the year above named, when under a conservative government, the Commons admitted the Jews by a resolution setting aside the standing order of the House, and Baron Rothschild took his seat as the first Jewish member. In 1860, a bill was passed through both houses, allowing the Jews to omit from the parliamentary oath the words "on the true faith of Christians." To complete the history of Jewish emancipation, it should here be added that in 1873, Sir George Jessel was made Master of the Rolls, being the first Jew admitted to the English bench, and in 1885, Sir N. Rothschild was created a peer, the first who was entered the English House of Lords. No Jew has as yet been a cabinet minister, but it is obvious that whenever it shall serve the interests of the party, which has for the time a predominance in country, to make a Jew Lord Chancellor, or one of the Secretaries of State, or even Premier, there will be no legal obstacle, and probably no opposition offered to such measures. The struggle, in fact, is over. The Jews are fully emancipated. So here we see that Jews in Europe after the 1800s have now found their way into government. And again, This is just trying to show the full story of the Jews, ultimately trying to see how we get to the place where we are today. Because it's one thing to say that these people are not real Jews when they have certain customs. Granted, the Chassidim or the Hasidic Jews come from, excuse me, that came out, I'm sorry, that came out of nowhere. But the Hasidic Jews come from a history of one who was considered an imposter, but his father was a rabbi. Now, this could be because he was converted, or it could be because he was in fact descended from a Jew who had migrated to the land of Poland. It doesn't give us that understanding, but when it comes to the sect itself, we understand that when they merge with the German Jews, we get this distinction of Ashkenazi Jews, and that in order to become a Jew, you have to be born to a Jewish mother. So I'm just trying to put everything in order for us so that we can stop calling these Jews Khazars, so we can stop looking at them as imposters, not so that we can focus on them per se, but so that we can begin focusing on our group, our community, to better ourselves. Because it's when you stop being bogged down by what you think you're being oppressed by that you begin finding out that it's now that you're now able to look into other things. And that, again, that's not to disrespect the Ashkenazim at all. That's just to say that their history is their history. Our history is our history. There have been points in history when we've had a collective history, but as in the state of affairs as they are today, those histories are not collective. In fact, we are seen as outsiders, as just Africans. When history is showing us, DNA is showing us, science is showing us that they also contain that African, sub-Saharan African DNA. But I digress. So we looked at Lionel Rothschild, who was the son of Nathan Rothschild. But the son Lionel was able to get the Rothschilds accepted into government. Let us now take a look at the grandson, Lionel Day Rothschild, born in 1882. Let me show you this picture. Just look at that picture. Excuse me. Look at this picture of Lionel Day Rothschild. It says this is the Exbury House. I don't know the history of the Exbury House, so I don't even know that's there. But maybe his story will tell us about it. But this is Lionel Day Rothschild. Lionel Day Rothschild. All right. So, how do we get out of here? All right. Let's read about him. Major Lionel Nathan Day Rothschild. Born January 25th, 1882. Died January 28th, 1942. He was a British banker and conservative politician, best remembered as a creator of Exbury Gardens by the New Forest in Hampshire. So that's where Exbury comes from. He was the creator. He was a part of the prominent Rothschild banking family of England. In 1910, he was elected to the House of Commons. In 1917, He founded the Anti-Zionist League of British Jews. This is fascinating. Oh, give me a second here. This is fascinating because to say that he co-founded the Anti-Zionist League of British Jews tells us that he wasn't a Zionist. He was not a Zionist Jew. He co-founded the Anti-Zionist League of British Jews. He was the eldest of three sons of Leopold de Rothschild and Marie Perugia. He was born in London and educated in Harrow School and Trinity College, Cambridge, where he graduated BA in 1903 and MA in 1908. On the 25th of January 1910, he was elected to the House of Commons for the constituency of Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire and was a member of Parliament until 1923. In 1912, he married Marie Louise Eugenie Beer, and they had the following children. See their children's names right there. It says in World War I, at the outbreak of World War I, Lionel's younger brother, Evelyn, and Anthony both joined the British Army. However, as the eldest son, he was needed as the heir to take over the family's N.M. Rothschild and Sons banking house. Much of his frustration, Lionel had no choice but to remain at home. So he wanted to go to war with his brothers, but he had to stay at home because he had work to do. When Britain entered the war in August 1914, Lionel had already been promoted from captain to major in the Royal Buckinghamshire Yeomanry. As the government recognized that many Jews yet had not been established or enlisted in military service, a central Jewish recruiting committee was established in December 1915. Its office was located at the Rothschilds' new court, which was colloquially known as Rothschild's Recruiting Office. While Lionel was appointed vice chairman, chairman was Edmund Sebag Montefiore. In 1917, he co-founded and headed the Anti-Zionist League of British Jews. He was made the OBE in the military division in 1917. He retired from the regiment in 1921. Both his brothers were wounded in battle, and brother Evelyn died of combat injuries suffered at the 1917 Battle of Moga Ridge. So this is just to show you that Lionel Nathan de Rothschild, he was a banker, but he was not a Zionist. This Rothschild founded the Anti-Zionist League of British Jews. Again, this is Jewish history, so this is not in any way trying to sully or soil the Ashkenazi name. This is just going over the history of the Jews. And again, I'm going somewhere. It's taken me a while. We've been here quite a long time, but I'm almost done. So, this is where the plot thickens. Because there was another Lionel Rothschild that history tells us about that is prominent, especially in Hebrew Israelite history or circles. And this history, let's see, is about Lionel Walter Rothschild. Well, that didn't go as planned. Let's look at him. Lionel Walter Rothschild. This was a third cousin. So he didn't descend from Nathan's line specifically. This is a third cousin. And if I'm not mistaken, third cousins share great grandparents. First cousins share the same grandparents. Second cousins share great grandparents. Third cousins share great great grandparents. So he was a Rothschild, but he was a third cousin. So it says Lionel Walter Rothschild, second Baron Rothschild, born February 8th, 1868 in London, England, and he died August 27th, 1937 in Tring, Buckinghamshire. He was a British zoologist who became a great collector and founded the Rothschilds Natural History Museum in London. The eldest son of Nathan Meyer Rothschild, he received his titles on the death of his father in 1915. Rothschild studied at the University of Bonn and then at Magdalen College, Cambridge, where his interests and ambitions in zoology developed under the influence of the distinguished zoologist Alfred Newton. Rothschild's boyhood collections of insects increased. Let's skip down. He served as a conservative member of Parliament from 1899 to 1910. In 1917, because of his Zionist sympathies and his eminent position in the Anglo-Jewish community, he received a letter from Arthur James Balfour, later Lord Balfour, then the British Foreign Secretary, declaring the British government's interest in establishing in Palestine a national home for the Jewish people. This letter became known as the Balfour Declaration. So this is where everything comes to a head. This is where we are now seated in current history. We just read not long ago that Lionel de Rothschild was an anti-Zionist. We're reading here that Lionel Walter Rothschild has Zionist sympathies, and he had an eminent position in the Anglo-Jewish community. This was the Rothschild who received a letter from Lord Balfour, Arthur James Balfour, in 1917. And this Balfour Declaration was the catalyst for the state of Israel. Now, I think it's important to mention here that when it comes to the state of Israel, Britain was on a path of establishing world dominance. If we remember correctly, British government was over America. The British government was over, if I'm not mistaken, Turkey and Constantinople. Britain had their foot in all types of different governments, so it would only make sense that Britain found a way to put a footprint in the Middle East, specifically in the well-known territory of Jerusalem. So let's see here. When it comes to Britain making some headway, it says Selig Brodetsky, he was a member of the World Zionist Executive, the president of the Board of Deputies of the British Jews, and the second president of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. The second president of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He lived from February of 1888 to May of 1954. It tells of his birth in 1908. He completed his studies with highest honors, being senior wrangler to the distress of the conservative press, which was forced to recognize that a son of immigrants surpassed all the local students. The news and scholarship enabled him to study at Leipzig University, where he was awarded a doctorate in 1913. His dissertation dwelt with the gravitational field. In 1919, he married Mary Berenblum, whose family had recently immigrated from Belgium, where her father had been a diamond merchant in Antwerp. They had two children, Paul Adelaide, in 1924 and 1927. Let's see. So this gentleman, he was also a world Zionist. And this is how we get the merger of these two different Jewish agencies in Europe. So let's go back to that Balfour Declaration. Did I say it right? Balfour Declaration. It says the Balfour Declaration was a statement of British support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It was made in a letter dated November 2nd, 1917, from Arthur James Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, to Lionel Walter Rothschild and Baron Rothschild of Schring, a leader of the Anglo-Jewish community. Though the precise meaning of the correspondence has been disputed, its statements were generally contradictory to both the Sykes-Picot Agreement, secret convention between Britain and France, and the Hussein-McMahon correspondence, an exchange of letters between the British High Commissioners in Egypt, Sir Henry McMahon, and Hussein ibn Ali, their emir of Mecca, which in turn contradicted one another. The Balfour Declaration, issued through the continued efforts of Klaim Weizmann and Nuhem Sokolov, Zionist leaders in London, fell short of the expectations of the Zionists, who had asked for the reconstruction of Palestine as the Jewish national home. This declaration specifically stipulated that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. The document, however, said nothing of political or national rights of these communities and did not refer to them by name. Nevertheless, the declaration aroused enthusiastic hopes among Zionists and seemed to fulfill the aims of the World Zionist Organization. The British government hoped that the declaration would rally Jewish opinion, especially in the United States, to the side of the Allied powers against the Central Powers during World War I. They hoped also that the settlement in Palestine of a pro-British Jewish population might help to protect the approaches to the Suez Canal and neighboring Egypt, and thus ensure a vital communication route to the British colonial possession in India. So that was the Balfour Declaration. Now, so now we see that the reason that we got the Balfour Declaration, it wasn't necessarily because the Jews were this very influential group. It was more so because Britain wanted a footprint in the Middle East. And this was a way to get what they wanted. It was a way for them to try to bring powers together. So now, this is how we get through World War One. We arrive at World War II because Hitler has now decided that the Jews are a scourge or a scourge, or however you say it, to the English countryside or the European countryside. And I wanted to touch on this real quick, very briefly, because I think it's important to make note that this propaganda campaign by Hitler, I remember back in around 2017, this was circulating very, very heavily. This was something that many of the Black Hebrew Israelites, or BHI, some were calling people moderate Jewish Hebrew Israelites, or however it goes, but they were circulating this image quite heavily because the trope was that Hitler knew who the Jews were, and he was saying that the European Jews were fake Jews. And this again is why I believe that the Ashkenazi Jews do deserve respect. Granted, our group went through slavery, but the Ashkenazi Jews deserve respect for the things that they endured in Europe. Because when we look at what this says here, it says this propaganda illustration taken from a short Nazi short film. Let me see if I can. Okay. It says a propaganda illustration taken from a Nazi short film. The caption reads in German, "The Jew is a bastard." The illustration linked Jews with other people the Nazi considered inferior: Orientals, blacks, Mongols, and East Africans. Now, to the contrary, I don't believe personally that they were necessarily, well, they were calling everybody inferior. But the point that they were making is that these Ashkenazi Jews descended from these Afro-Asiatic black Negro Jews, and that they were bastards. Again, we discussed earlier that the Jews of Germany were believed, and I read in the passage, that the Jews of Germany were believed to have descended from these German soldiers who had brought the most beautiful Jewish women back to the Rhine, impregnated them, and left them with the children to raise on their own, and to raise those children in Jewish customs. So this is a well-known history. Hitler was German. So he was calling these Ashkenazi Jews bastards because they were left by their fathers to be raised by these Jewish mothers, and that they descend from these black Jews who had been in Europe throughout history. Now again, this is not to sensationalize things. This is just connecting those dots. This is just putting things together so that we can give a full history. I believe in putting the truth out so that everybody can see the truth. So again, this image that it circulated for quite a while, and a lot of people, like I said, people were claiming Hitler knew who the Jews were, and he was saying that the white Ashkenazi Jews were imposters, but no, he was saying that these Jews were bastards, and that they descend from the Jews that had been expelled previously, and that their blood was still in Europe, and that they needed to be that they needed to be exterminated. So this wasn't a campaign to say, hip hip hooray, we know who the real Jews are. This was a campaign to say, we didn't do a good enough job of getting these Jews out of Europe, and now we are left with this quote unquote blight. Not my words, but this is just me paraphrasing. So this was a propaganda effort to turn the Europeans against those Ashkenazi Jews. Again, this is why the Jews need respect, because they did endure. And I have my book here. This book I released this year. This book is called the Unredacted Manifest. You can get it on Amazon. But in this book, I have a chapter specifically about the Ashkenazi Jews. And in that book, I make the statement, this is not us versus them. This is a them because of us. The Ashkenazi Jews have prominence in Europe because they didn't have a full Jewish look that had been prosecuted or persecuted from the 1400s through slavery. So this is not an attempt to say that one is better than the other. This is just an attempt to draw the lines together to show how more connected we are than we are separated. And finally here, as we round things up, I just want to show you that there was, or there is, there is a record of the Jews going before the United States court asking for assistance in providing that Jewish home in Europe. And I was intending to read some of this, but it's late, and I don't. To be honest with you, I'm tired. This might be something I'll touch on a little later. I might drop another separate video about it. But I'll read this part. It says, this is Committee of Foreign Affairs, the House of Representatives in Washington, Tuesday, April 18th, 1922. The committee for this day met. Honorable Stephen G. Porter, the chairman, presiding with the committee, had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 52, which reads as follows. Whereas the Jewish people have many centuries believed and yearned for the rebuilding of their ancient homeland, and whereas owing the outcome of the World War and their part therein, the Jewish people, under definite and adequate international guarantees, are to be enabled, with due regard to the rights of all elements of the population of Palestine and to the sanctity of its holy place, to recreate and reorganize a national home in the land of their fathers. Therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives, the Senate concurrent, that the Congress of the United States hereby expresses its profound satisfaction in that outcome of the victorious war, with promises the building up of a new and beneficent life in Palestine, rejoices in this act of historic justice about to be consummated, and on behalf of the American people commends an undertaking which will do honor to Christendom and give the House of Israel its long denied opportunity to reestablish a fruitful Jewish life and culture in the ancient Jewish land. And then it goes into the different testimonies, questionings, statements, so forth and so on. The name of this document is let's see, the establishment of a national home in Palestine. It is just basically the hearing of the Jews before the Committee on Foreign Affairs, an attempt to get acceptance of the United States to help them get the land of Palestine. Now, the one thing I noticed, and that should always be noticed or noted when it comes to movements, although intentions are great, although there are honest pushes to ascertain what's beneficial for everyone, when leadership dies out, if that leadership doesn't put in place or raise up the proper leadership to take over, missions get skewed, objectives become obscure, things go off the rails, so to speak. When it came to the establishment of the State of Israel, as written in the Balfour Declaration, as stated in this hearing before the House of Representatives, there was quite the agreement that there was not going to be any disturbance of the Arabian people who already lived in that territory. There was an understanding that these people will be able to live their lives without being harassed, and that this was just an effort to reestablish a Jewish homeland living amongst the people. And from what we see today, not criticizing, because I don't want to come off as critical. I don't want to give my opinion on how things are going. But as we can see today, there has been an objective made, or an objective push presented to extend or expand this territory of the Jewish homeland. So I do agree that, again, the Jews, or that the Ashkenazi Jews, deserve the respect that they've garnered. They've endured some horrendous things throughout this existence, throughout this history of sorts, especially throughout the 20th century. Now, here we are all together. When it comes to our group and their group, we find ourselves miles apart, seemingly worlds divided. At times, their noses turned up at us, being the blacks written off since the earliest times in history. Known as slaves to Europe since the Council of Toledo in 694. Them initially overlooked because of their resemblance to the populace, but declaring our suffering as miles apart from theirs, because to many of them as well, all we are is slaves, despite those who marched with us during our fight to have the basic civil rights in this nation. Because of a history built on being accepted by society, we've been completely disregarded. So when we begin seeing ourselves in history, instead of having conversations about us being erased or hidden through sanitation of the story, it's commanded that the slaves remain quiet. There's no room for us. The largest rub being that DNA parses out the reality that these connections are not just theories. They're proven. So yes, the Ashkenazi Jews do deserve respect. But so do we. We've all been outcast for millennia. But for the last 400 years, we have had to fight to come up from underneath the waves of oppression, only to be forced right back under as soon as it seems as if we're beginning to settle and catch our breaths. Again, God sees all. No amount of trying to wish him away or working of magic spells with trinkets and amulets can control the Creator at all. God is not a genie. He allows men to work the will of our hands, but the day of reckoning and justification soon comes. The day will come when the world has to answer, and he will call his own people before him and question all of our motives and our deliberate ignorances. So while every day Ashkenazim cry for respect and declare their rights to operate with autonomy, all we ask is for our respect too. But history has a stench that cannot be banished. It's the decay of that strange fruit that Billie Holiday sang about. But that rotting smell has embedded or saturated into every thread of the fabric of this nation at the cellular level. The same fruit that to this very day randomly shows up on trees in the South. Trees that will share their recorded testimonies of time when that day of reckoning is upon us. And if you've enjoyed this lesson and the walk through history and DNA, I do encourage you to like and share this video. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment in the comment section. You know, let's have the discussion. But again, thank you for joining me here at the Ready Brew. It was a long time and it was a good night, but at any rate, I really do appreciate you. I thank you for watching things on the playback. But in the meantime, peace.
Welcome to the Ready Brew. This is the place you need to be. Here at the Ready Brew, I know just what you need to see. Bible, forensics, history, and DNA pulls all the pieces together, reviving the story and bringing the facts, unveiling what they thought was buried forever. Pull up a chair, grab yourself a cup. You know I wanna talk about it. Let's go.